At the beginning of the scene we are shown Michio, who suddenly wakes up in a horse stable where the teenager himself still thinks that he has entered a full drive type game or something similar to Sao. And this was reinforced by the appearance of a pop-up menu in his eyes and the presence of a sword, which he had chosen as an initial prize when starting the game. It is explained that Michio is apparently in a remote village, where the majority of the population work as farmers, but who knows? Maybe this is included in the scenario for new players. Suddenly from a distance a group of bandits appeared, so that automatically the villagers tried their best to fight them. But unfortunately these efforts seemed in vain because they had never held a sword before. However, Michio, who saw the bandits busy fighting the villagers, thought of a strategy by intending to attack from behind. And this plan proved to be successful, causing the rest of the bandits to go haywire. But while still assuming that this was all a game, Michio didn't let a single person escape, so that in the end, he alone succeeded in slaughtering the entire bandit squad. Before heading to the village head's house, Michio was shown the loot from all the bandits he had defeated, namely intelligence cards or some kind of identification cards from the bandits, where everything would be handed over to Michio. But there was one thing that felt odd, namely a bandana that was different from the results of his initial observations. So the village head then promised to find out where the bandana fell. Then when he was at the village head's house, Michio was relaxing. He realized that he didn't know how to log out of the game. And even though he had said various commands, hoping that the logout menu would appear, Michio didn't find anything. So this made the teenager realize the fact that he was trapped in another world and the bandits he killed were not NPCs, but real humans. Suddenly, for a moment, Michio was only stunned, not thinking that he had killed someone, but because killing bandits was not against the law there. Michio tried to strengthen himself to think that what he had done was nothing more than an act of self-defense. After further investigation, the person who exchanged Michio's bandana was apparently one of the residents, and in accordance with the applicable punishment, the man would be sold as a slave with half of the proceeds going to Michio and the other half to the family, because they had lost their backbone, and the village chief also informed them that they would leave for the city tomorrow morning and advised Michio to sell the loot to the knights there. Long story short, after exchanging the bandits' cards for some money, Michio was taken to the house of the slave trader named Alan, and the man was also willing to buy the slave. They wanted to sell even though the price offered was not too high. When he heard Michio's heroic actions when saving the villagers, Alan seemed to take an interest in Michio. Shortly after parting ways with his introduction, Michio realized that he was alone in this world and no one knew him, and in the midst of confusion, looking for a new purpose in life, Alan appeared to invite Michio to talk, or more precisely, he wanted to promote one of his slaves, named Roxanne, to be bought by Michio. Roxanne can not only help when fighting, Roxane can also be invited as a sleeping partner. So automatically Michio's eyes immediately wander to see all the girls' assets.
Dan ketika Alan menyebutkan harga yang fantastis,
of course, Michio, in fact, Even poor people can't afford it. But Alan gives a deadline of 5 days before Roxanne will be sold to someone else. So this will also be Michio's main motivation to survive in this world.
金を稼ぐかわからない。ただ一つだけ決めたことがある。ロクサーヌは俺が手に入れる。
In order to earn a lot of money quickly, Michio was suggested to options by Alan, first by hunting monsters in the maze and secondly, working as a bounty hunter by exterminating high-value bandits. But this method is not recommended, because if Michio's actions are too flashy, then he will otherwise be targeted by the bandits themselves. And considering it for quite a long time, the teenager has the safest way, namely by going to explore the labyrinth.
まずは堅実な方法から試すか。よし、迷宮に行こう。
Long story short, when he arrived at the entrance to the labyrinth, Michio himself was quite nervous because for him this was the first time he had set foot into a monster's nest. But it turned out that the place was not like what he had imagined. Instead, it looked like a man-made building. As a start, Michio also checks his status and at the same time tests the various skills he has. And among them, there are 2 skills which are said to be quite interesting. The first is the passive skill of the Durandal sword, namely being able to restore HP and MP every time he defeats an enemy. The sword can also accelerate the user's senses to the maximum point, even though at the same time it will drain a lot of MP. And the second skill is a teleportation skill, which is able to move several boxes in the dungeon, but the skill itself is quite draining MP, which can be seen when Michi immediately feels lethargic, or weak as proof that her MV is almost drained.
魔法を使って MP が減ると気分が落ち込み思考がネガティブになるんだ。いくら回復するとは言っても、この躁鬱の繰り返しは精神的にきつい。
After being satisfied hunting all day, Michio exchanged the drop item from the labyrinth, which turned out to only be valued at 273 bronze coins, which of course was far from enough to be able to buy Roxanne for 400,000. But Michio was not discouraged. The next day, he went straight to the labyrinth early in the morning to try his luck. But instead of getting good results, Michio accidentally entered a kind of room which apparently was a nest of monsters. Suddenly, without adequate potions or equipment, Michio can only rely on the regeneration ability of his Durandal sword, and even though once the teenager fell down, due to too many enemies, thanks to the motivation to get Roxanne, the teenager still got up and swung his sword until in the end, he managed to completely slaughter all the monsters there. But unfortunately, all his hard work was still not enough to be able to buy Roxanne, plus the deadline was almost up, making Michio finally choose a quite extreme path, namely relying on hunting down bandits.
他に手はない。盗賊を狩ろう。
First of all, before acting, Michio deliberately went around the city, using identification skills to be able to distinguish bandits who are mingling with the population. But after walking all day and even visiting slum areas, Michio didn't meet any bandits, but only saw the sight of people living below the poverty line. Unlucky during the day, Michio did the same thing again at night. But this time, the teenager also washed his eyes by visiting the nightlife district, where by chance, he managed to meet one of the bandits. When he secretly followed the people, Michio finally managed to find their base, and found out that the bandits were related to the bandits he had defeated at the beginning. And relying on this, Michio lured one of them using the bandana he had looted earlier.
金貨は俺の部屋だ。そこで話をしてもいいか。
ああ、
入れ。ここだ。金を渡す。
However, the bandit he was talking to apparently had no intention of negotiating, but only wanted to take the bandana by force, but Michio apparently also predicted this. So, from here on, the teenager started killing them one by one while they were asleep, no matter whether they were men or women. But unfortunately, one of the targets actually made a sound, which woke up the troops outside, which automatically made Michio force to be satisfied with only managing to bring 3 of their cards. Then when the situation was safe, an inner conflict occurred again within Michio. A kind of regret emerged because he had once again killed man.
この世界では盗賊を始末することなんか大したことじゃないはずだ。こうするしかなかったんだ。
The next day, after exchanging 3 bandit cards for a number of prizes, Michio finally collected enough money to be able to buy Roxanne, and without hesitation, the teenager paid Alan in cash so he could buy the thing he had been dreaming of for several days.
当家の奴隷をお買い上げいただきありがとうございました。
ついに俺はロクサーヌを手に入れた。
二人部屋に移りたいだって？
ああ、食事も2人分だ。
ダブルでいいな。
え？おう、それで構わない。
When we arrive at the inn, we can see the look of anxiety continuing to appear on Roxanne's face, because she is not yet used to her current owner. And the first thing Michio asks Roxanne is to hold her ears. He was curious about what kind of sensation he would feel later. Then when he was satisfied, Michio started to tell his origins, that he came from a very far away place. So automatically, he didn't really understand the customs of the current place. So from now on, Roxanne was asked to continue with Michio, while teaching him the norms that applies to his master. So, since they will be living together now, of course there are many things that have to be prepared, starting from buying a shield so that you can take Roxanne to explore the labyrinth, to buying daily equipment, and don't forget that Michio also gave spare clothes and underwear for the girl. But one interesting thing about Roxanne is that the girl is very careful and chooses things to the point that when she returns to the inn, she doesn't realize the sun has already set. Preparations that must be prioritized. Michio confidently wants to unbox Roxanne, but unfortunately, the request was rejected on the grounds that the sun was still high, and Roxanne wanted to maintain Michio's proof equipment first.
装備品は命を預けるものですから、きちんと手入れしておくべきです。
想像はしていたけど、装備品の状態にもこだわるのね、やっぱり。
Long story short, it ended with an adrenaline-filled sport last night. In the morning, Michio immediately took Roxanne to go to the labyrinth, wanting to test the girl's fighting skills. But first, Roxanne was the one who was shocked because she didn't expect that her master could use the teleport at, so they don't need to get tired of walking to the labyrinth.
俺以外使えるやつは少ないかもしれん。だから内密にな。
ご主人様、すごいです。
Well, when you want to find a direction where there are lots of monsters, this is Roxanne's turn to show off her strengths, where the girl is able to detect the presence of monsters using her sense of smell, and not only that, she also has extraordinary reflexes. She can see that every attack launched by a monster can be read and avoided by himself.
いや、完璧に魔物の攻撃を避けている。一見すると余裕がなさそうに見えるが、実際には逆だ。かわして攻める。華麗に踊っているかのようだ。
So now that Michio is no longer alone in exploring the labyrinth, he also wants to test various new things. One of which is the healing job project, which he says can be obtained if he defeats monsters using his bare hands. And thanks to the help of Roxanne, who reduced the banana ice monster, Michio was able to easily get the job.
手当て。おお、確かに痛みが引いた。これから魔物の攻撃を受けたときは、俺がスキルを使って回復するから。
すごいです。
Okay, a little information about the labyrinth itself. Even though it is shaped like a man-made building, the labyrinth is categorized as a living creature that absorbs life energy from humans, who are killed in it, and the only way to beat the maze is to defeat every boss on each floor. Therefore, Michio and Roxanne's new goal has now been determined, namely to make their name as the first people to successfully conquer the maze.
はい。
Even though it has a form that is not much different from a weak monetary one, the floor boss himself has quite a special ability, namely being able to use magic. But it's a shame before you know what magic will be used. Michio spontaneously attacked and was followed by Roxanne, so that in the end the boss was defeated, leaving only a leaf as the remaining drop item. But what was interesting was when Roxanne picked up the leaf, Michio, who has identification skills, can see that the girl has gotten a new job as a herbalist, which is highly suspected. This could have happened because she touched the leaf. So, because he feels that this skill will be useful later, Michio chases Roxanne out, and then back in to be able to defeat the boss again, Floor.
生薬生成。できた。
The adventure continues to the second floor, where we can see at a glance that there is nothing different from the first floor. But the main difference that is most clearly visible lies in the appearance of the monsters. If on the first floor only one monster appears, on the second floor two monsters appear at once, and this also applies in multiples to floors 4 and 8 and so on. For the type of monster itself, a new variant has emerged, namely a kind of caterpillar which is capable of shooting a kind of binding thread. So automatically Michio's main priority, when faced directly, is to defeat the caterpillar monster first.
ご主人様。
ダメだ。ロクサーヌも間に合わない。だったら受けてやる。こいつはお返しだ。
After being satisfied with their day's adventure, Michio and Roxanne decided to return to the inn, but as they were on their way, Michio, who was probably impatient, asked the girl to glance at the slave trader's house. Apparently Michio wanted to tell you that someone suspicious was watching the place, and because he was worried that the mysterious person would want to do something different, Michio, accompanied by Roxanne, went back to Alan's house so he could warn him directly. However, instead of being taken seriously, the slave trader wasn't too worried about it, thinking it was all thus the work of his business rival. But when Roxanne spoke, the person watching him was a bandit. Only then will the expression on his face change, and he will tell you that this has something to do with the slave that Michio sold the other day. It was said that a few days earlier there were two people who came to buy the slave that Michio was selling, where one of them talked to Alan to negotiate the price, while the other talked to the slave and asked where the bandit's bandana was that he had previously exchanged. But the strangest thing is that after buying the slave, they didn't immediately take him away, but instead entrusted him to Alan's house first. So it is highly suspected that the slave left behind would act as a key or the person tasked with opening the door, so that the bandits outside could enter and then
可
invade.
能ですし、おそらくそう来るでしょう。
Actually, Misio himself no longer wants to get involved in the bandit problem, but Roxanne keeps asking his master to help because he feels indebted to the servant, who took care of him in the past. So, Misio offered to be a bodyguard, and wanted to solve the problem of the slave he had previously sold.
報酬はそうですな。1000ナールでいかがでしょう。もちろん倒した族の装備品とインテリジェンスカードはお渡しします。
決まりだ。
Long story short, after various preparations, Michelle and Robson came to Alan's house. They were immediately greeted by Alan himself and introduced to several fighting slaves, who would be ready to protect him. But unfortunately, we won't be shown a fight scene, because Michio was assigned to stand guard on the second floor, in anticipation of one of the bandits escaping upstairs. And apparently this really happened. Michio actually saw the bandit who had been watching before hiding in one of the rooms. Suddenly, when he saw this, Michio finally had the opportunity to test one of the skills he had never tried before. In order to avoid the risk if something unexpected happened suddenly,
横領交換。
unexpectedly, this skill works by seizing the opponent's cell phone for a fee. Michio's MP is immediately drained and automatically makes the teenager fall helpless. After receiving the payment as agreed, Michio hurriedly took Roxanne to the labyrinth in order to recover her mana. At the same time, the teenager wanted to try something new again, namely learning to master magic. It is explained that magic itself is divided into 4 basic elements, and each of these 4 elements has 3 general use techniques. For example, some are cast as shields and ultimate magic, which will expand the attack area while consuming quite a lot of mana. But the new problem facing Michio now is the lack of attack power. So Roxanne then advises his master to give him a magic wand in the city center later.
この辺りですとクーラタルの町まで行かないと常設の店舗はありません。あそこには大きな迷宮があるので探索者を相手にする店が集まっているんです。
一度行ってみるのもありだな。
The next day, when he had finished exchanging the drop item for some money, Michio happened to be offering a teleportation service to the capital, and because it provided various needs that Michio needed, so Roxanne also suggested accepting this person's services. Because if Michio has visited a new area once, then he can automatically travel, as he pleases with his teleportation skill.
ご主人様、大丈夫ですか？
これでクーラタルにはいつでも行けるようになった。今日のところは宿に戻ろう。
はい。
The story shifts to the city center, where Michio and Roxanne are seen going around looking for traders who sell various magic wands. But by chance they end up entering a kitchen equipment shop, guarded by a woman who is also a property agent and then offers Michio to buy a house there. Okay, a little information about the areas in the city center itself, which are divided into 6 parts, each of which is separated based on status or group, and because Michio felt that they couldn't continue to live in an inn, which would certainly disturb their next-door neighbors, with the sound of Roxanne howling every night. Michio finally considered the decision to buy a house. Then, after buying the magic wand that Michio needed, he returned to one of the property agents where he was taken to one of the houses to be shown the shape and various facilities available from the house, starting from a full-set kitchen room, a large bathroom, and a fairly spacious main bedroom. But what Michio likes most about this house is that the distance between one house and another is far enough so that their privacy won't be disturbed.
契約書もお作りします。
これが俺とロクサーヌの家だ。
As a result, they spend the whole day cleaning various corners of the house and buying the furniture they need. And when night comes, of course, there is no need for Mimin to explain what activities they will do next. The next day, the setting returns to the labyrinth, where it is seen that Michio and Roxanne have been hunting rabbits because the other day, they received a request from a clothing shop to collect rabbit laborers to process them into cloth to be traded to the nobility.
両親が痛む。両親が痛むが。ファイヤーボール。
Well, thanks to Roxanne's sharp sense of smell, it didn't take long for Missio to easily hunt down several rabbits until before they realized they had arrived at the boss's waiting room, which was busy with queues as if they were about to enter a game attraction. But what attracted Michio's attention the most was a young man, the same age as himself, who wanted to single-handedly defeat the floor boss. It is explained that the chain boss himself is said to be in the form of a rabbit whose attack power is not too strong. But the chain boss has its own advantages, namely extraordinary speed. Even Michio's eyes can barely see it if he doesn't use his sense enhancement skills. However, the young man, let's call him Agus, still chuckled and wanted to go in because he was bored of hunting downstairs, and wanted to try his luck on the next floor so he could buy a slave like Michio.
やっと私にも運が向いてきそうですよ。では。
Then, when Michio's turn came, the young man immediately felt strange because it was unusual for the boss to appear first, waiting for them. But when the monster was defeated, as usual, Michio accidentally saw the remaining equipment from the previous adventurer, which automatically reminded Michio of the young man.
あの気さくな男はさっきのボスに。命の価値とはこんなものなのか。
どうかされましたか?
After that incident, Michio continued to think about the risks of becoming an adventurer, afraid that he would later become a victim, and from there, the teenager continued to consider solutions by increasing his combat power and other options by recruiting a new slave. Sometime later, Michio was seen talking privately with the teenager Roxanne, expressing his desire to return to Alan's place to ride a will, if something undesirable happened to him. Moreover, the teenager wanted to free Roxanne from slave status when she was gone. But Roxanne did something unexpected. She even promised that she would go to Michio's grave when her master died. And this is not merely shown by Roxanne to protect her pride as a soldier, but she doesn't know how to live without the figure of Michio. Suddenly, when he heard all of Roxanne's words, Michio was shocked. He didn't think that a slave's loyalty would reach that level. But his goal of going to Alan's place still hadn't changed. He also wanted to find a new slave with forging skills to be able to modify his weapon to make it stronger.
できれば女性が。
パーティーメンバーを増やすのは良いお考えだと思います。
まあ、ロクサーヌが反対するようなら無理に女性を選ぶこともないか。
Long story short, when he arrived at Alan Michio's residence, he immediately expressed his desire to find a new slave, with the criteria of being able to fight on the front lines, as well as having forging skills so he could modify his weapons. And Alan, who heard this, called one of his slaves named Sherry, who turned out to be a dwarf, but unfortunately, he didn't have the forging skills that other dwarfs generally had. Well, what's interesting is that slaves generally try not to do anything so that Sherry doesn't get it. But Sherry clearly expresses all her strengths, which she does on purpose because she knows Michio is a good master, and instead of having to work with the wrong person, of course Sherry is calmer.
私は村で一二の力持ちでした。ドワーフの中では背も高い方ですし、迷宮に入ってもご迷惑はかけません。どうかよろしくお願いします。
Then, after the introduction process, Alan deliberately called one of the servants who had looked after Roxanne in the past to make the girl leave so she could talk privately with Michio. We're not only talking about the rarity of a dwarf slave. Alan also revealed the advantages of a Sherry who doesn't mind being used as a sex friend. Therefore, the price offered is quite high considering that Sherry herself hasn't mastered forging skills. However, Michio didn't lose his wits in negotiating because previously he had been told by Roxanne that the thinness of a dwarf sears indicated that the dwarf was in his productive age. Plus, Michio had helped ward off a bandit attack at Alan's house. So, in the end, the slave trader gave a special price to potential regular customers that after finding out that his master gave him a series in cash, Robson's expression immediately changed, indicating that there was a slight inner movement within him. But considering his status as a slave, Roxanne did not express his jealousy. Then when she was about to take Sherry home, the girl was immediately shocked and didn't think that her parents had teleportation skills, especially when Roxanne told her that Michio also mastered magic. The girl was even more confused about who Michio really was.
このことは内密な。
内密です。はい。
First of all, before inviting Cherry into the labyrinth, Michio armed his new slave with a large club. Who knows? Maybe this could unlock Sherry's forging skills. And don't forget, Michio also provided armor so that the girl's body wouldn't be scratched. As a result, after all the preparations were ready, they immediately went to the labyrinth, and because Sherry wasn't used to what she had to do, Michio gave her an example by being at the front, and at the same time wanting to show off her strengths, so that your girl would get even more clumsy with herself.
決まった。
すごいです。
そうだろう、そうだろう。
どうやったらあんなに華麗に避けられるんですか？
こっち見ろよ。
Returning home when he was about to have dinner with Sherry, he was again shocked when he was allowed to eat at the same table and eat the same menu as his master, where at that time it was quite rare to find a figure like Michio who wanted to humanize a slave. And even though Michio himself is included in the class of perverts, who have various wild fantasies in his brain, this can still be covered by his good nature.
ありがとうございます、ご主人様。
セーフ。はい、セリーナ。一番奴隷には先に料理を渡さないといけないってことか。
The final scene shows Michio waking up feeling very happy. Perhaps because he had a wonderful experience when pushing rank with two girls at the same time. Michio decides to increase the number of his slaves